All right, last thing up, and then my voice is going to die. So, Stranger Things, Season 4, Volume 1. Let's talk about it. So the way that I'm going to structure this, this review is I'm going to go by groups of characters. I know a lot of people have been doing that on the reviews. I think it's the most constructive, because the show has really split up their characters. So let's start first with the Hawkins Group. And then I'll kind of sort of encapsulate my overall thoughts of the show within these separate groups. So the Hawkins Group, I think, is good for the most part. I think that there are some things in there that I don't love. Just looking at this picture, I think that Dustin and Steve, I think Steve is going to die in Volume 2. I'm one of those people who, given how they've built up the relationships between him and Dustin and him and Nancy and him and Robin, I think Steve's time is almost up. I think that there is a reason that Dustin is sort of annoyed at Steve the entire season so far, which doesn't always work. I think it kind of makes me wonder why Dustin is so mean to Steve all the time, and Steve is kind of mean back to Dustin, and Steve doesn't want to be a babysitter and all that sort of stuff. It's funny, but I think that there's a reason, because it kind of, if Steve dies, Dustin will kind of be sad about it and all that sort of stuff. So character development, things like that. Just a guess. Dustin, again, I think is sort of the comic relief, if you will. I think he brings a lot more. Gaten Matarazzo brings a lot more to the show than just that. But I think that overall, he has a lot of really funny scenes in the show, which is good. I think that Maya Hawke as Robin is interesting. She's interesting because, I think that they do expand upon a lot of the great backstory that they've given her in Season 3. I also think that just characterization-wise, she comes off as a very different character than in Season 3, and it might just have to do with who she's in proximity with. That's kind of why I wanted her to have more scenes with Steve, because in Season 3, you see her with Steve, and she's the assertive one, right? She's the one who is bossing him around and making fun of him and calling him, a dingus, and all these sorts of things. And then when she's with Nancy and when she's with basically everyone else, she's just this nervous, talkative, rambling, kind of really, really giving this image of, just nervous. That didn't quite seem to be the character that she was in Season 3, and I think it's fine. I think it works for the most part. I just think it's an interesting character change to give her. Lucas, I think, has some really interesting character development with the basketball team and sort of how he's a part of it with Jason and all that sort of stuff. I think it sort of goes away towards the end, but I think it's fine. I think that they gave him a lot more to do than he had in previous seasons, and I'm really glad for it. This scene was funny when they're talking to the police. That was good. This scene was also funny when Dustin jumps over the counter to get to the computer. But the character that I think stands out the most easily is Sadie Sink as Max. Her performance, obviously, in the Dear Billy episode, obviously, but she overall throughout the season just gives a dynamite performance, and I am so glad, because Max was one of those characters in seasons 2 and 3 that I was a little iffy on. I liked her more and more as we got along seasons 2 and seasons 3, and season 4 just really, really expands upon the character in a beautiful way with the trauma and the loss that she feels with Billy, and the way that Vecna preys upon that. And overall, I think that the Hawkins Group is really staying true to what Stranger Things is, right? The mystery element of going to the Creel house and figuring things out, and trying to figure out this mystery of what's happening in Hawkins and why is Vecna coming and things like that. So I think that this group and their storyline works really well for the most part. Okay, let's talk about my least favorite storyline. Let's talk about these guys. Jonathan, Will, and Mike. Yeah. We'll talk about where is he? We'll talk about Argyle in just a little bit, but Jonathan, Will, and Mike. This storyline is not good. And it bums me out because I love these characters, right? I love Jonathan, I love Will, and I love Mike. These characters are not good in the season. I don't know why. I don't know what happened to them. I do know that they're not good, and that is a bummer. Because let's go from left to right, right? I mean, first of all, they're on the run for most of the season, and their storyline kind of just becomes superfluous at a certain point. And literally, as much as I love episode 7 of season 4, The Massacre at Hawkins Lab, about 20 minutes in, I realized that we hadn't cut back to this storyline. And then about 40 minutes into the hour and 40-minute episode, I realized, no, we still haven't cut back to this storyline. And the more we got onto it, the more I realized we weren't going to cut back to the storyline. And I think the writers just kind of didn't know what to do with these characters, and that's really kind of a bummer. But anyway, so let's start with Jonathan on the left. Jonathan is one of the most disappointing characters to me in this entire season. I understand kind of the joke of going to California and becoming more of like a stoner and bringing in Argyle and things like that. I think there are some funny scenes, like the scene at the dinner table with Joyce. That being said, it seems like they just didn't know what to do with the character, because the sort of on and off stuff he has with Nancy that's sort of addressed at the beginning is so bizarre to me. And I don't quite know how to think about it. Like, I personally don't love the idea of Nancy getting back together with Steve, even though I love Steve. I think Steve needs to find his own people and his own identity if he's not going to, die at the end of the season. And I think Nancy needs to be with Jonathan, like, not just because of any arbitrary reason, but just because that's what they've set up in the show. Shared trauma, right? And I think that the on and off and on off thing again is just artificial drama at this point. If Steve survives season 4, or even if Jonathan survives season 4, he may not. Nancy might not. Who knows? But I think it's bizarre. I really do. Will, again, doesn't have much to do. I think he has some feelings for characters, maybe Mike or maybe Elle or no, wait, know what I'm saying. Mike has feelings for Elle. Will might have feelings for Mike. It'll get complicated. Sorry. We've been going for like an hour and 20 minutes. I'm saying random stuff. Anyways. And then there's Mike, who I don't understand why he can't say I love you to Elle after everything that, and by the way, before I watched season 4, I binged all of seasons 1 through 3 again, for like the third time. It is amazing, by the way. And 11 says I love you at the end of season 3. So I don't understand what is going on here that he can't say it back to her. It seems bizarre. It seems weird. It seems unnatural. Is that the right word to say here? It feels like these characters, they just didn't know what to do with them. And then they, again, we'll talk about Argyle in just a little bit. And then they go to Utah. And it's hard, it's hard to really get behind this group, and it's a bummer because I really like these characters. But again, I like the beginning part a little bit more where they're all together here, in California and things like that. But again, just I don't know, not my favorite arc at all. 11. Let's talk about 11. I think 11L has some really good stuff in this series, this season. I also think that some of the stuff gets dragged on because, to be quite honest, a lot of it is flashback, right? Like it's an interesting way to give backstory, because if you think about it, this entire season is just Elle flashback for her character after like episode 3. And while I think they do it well, I think also, obviously we'll get to Vecna. We'll get to Henry in just a second. Oops. But I think that on the one hand, I'm impressed with how well they give the backstory and make it feel like it's an integral part of the story, which it is. On the other hand, it's just backstory. It's exposition, right? I think Millie Bobby Brown obviously gives a great performance. Again, she always does. I'm a little torn on this character arc, to be quite honest with you. So there's that. And then we got Joyce and Murray and Hopper. Another character arc that I think was dragged on way too long. I think it's fine. Well, so, okay, first of all, I think the Joyce and Murray stuff is much more interesting than the Hopper stuff because they actually have things to do. Like, getting Hopper himself is so interesting. It's much more interesting. I think the stuff with Yuri is funny. Hopper, I don't think has anything really interesting to do in this show. And that's such a bummer because seasons 1 through 3, Hopper was the character, right? He was the main character of the series, basically. I mean, aside from 11. And him and Joyce were really leading the first 2 seasons, and they kind of took the backseat in the 3rd season, but they were still doing things with Alexi and with Murray. The fact that through 7 episodes, we've just finally got to the Demogorgon fight, and they're just finally maybe getting out of the prison, it feels like a wasted opportunity. I think there's a line where Hopper says something like, maybe I can help 11. I don't know how you're helping 11 by killing one Demogorgon. Maybe we'll see how that factors in later on in the series. I don't know. But again, it felt like a wasted opportunity. And here he is with his buddy. I like their interactions. I don't dislike watching any of it. I just think it got dragged on for way too long. Let's talk about the new characters. I picked the goofiest picture of Eddie. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to stare at this for just a few seconds, but I think Eddie really grew on me as the series went on. I thought he was very weird and eccentric and just kind of the crazy guy, the outcast of high school. At first, and I really got to like him through his vulnerability. I don't know if he's gonna be elevated to Steve and Jonathan status, by the end of the season, maybe. But I did really like him. Argyle, on the other hand, I didn't love. And maybe that's just part of the reason. It's just because he's part of that weird storyline with Will, Jonathan, and Mike, where they're just kind of going around the country and finding Susie and going on a goose chase to find 11. I don't know. Maybe I just don't love the performance by Eduardo Franco, I believe is the actor's name. I don't love Argyle. But wrapping up the show, and again, tying in all of my cumulative thoughts on the show is Vecna. So we have all of these storylines that are converging, but the one thing that holds them all together is Vecna. And this is what Stranger Things does so well, is that it has all of these plot points and plot elements and characters and stories, but it's all tied together by one continuous thread. It could have been the Mind Flayer, Billy, Will and the Mind Flayer. It was the Demogorgon in season 1, and now it's Vecna. And I love Vecna. The kills are gruesome and horrifying and just show how terrifying this character is. Obviously, we get the revelation that it is Victor Creel's son, Henry, who is revealed to be one, which is, just such a great twist, I think. The ending was a little exposition heavy of him just kind of telling everything to 11. But I think that the way that they finally begin to wrap things up into the show and make it feel as satisfying as it does is so impressive. They've been able to do that for all 3 seasons before. It's truly impressive how they're able to do that. And I think that while I have questions about the Vecna twist, sort of like what he has to do with the previous 3 seasons and how he factors in, because I think Dustin called him the Mind Flayer's 5-star general. Is that true? Is that just Dustin's speculation? Is Vecna actually just a pawn to somebody else? I don't know. But regardless, I think that, just look at that design, and it's mostly practical too, which is crazy. That this really encapsulates my thoughts on Stranger Things. Is that, there are messy things, right? There are things that I don't like as much. Here's Argyle for one. Here's Popper for another. Here's this storyline with these 3 for another. But at the end of the day, what Stranger Things is able to do is just wrap it up together in such a nice, satisfying, cohesive way that makes it feel like it's all one giant story that's unraveling itself as you go along. And that's what I think television is really, really for, right? It's not to tell a movie in 6 parts, really. I'm sorry, Marvel, it isn't. It's really to do this, to explore characters, to really, where is she? There he is. To explore characters in depth like Max, to give character interactions that we haven't seen before. To give more backstory, to go on side adventures, and to introduce new characters, and ultimately have a story, have a point. And I think that is what Stranger Things season 4 volume 1 does so well. I think episodes 7 and 4 are easily the best ones of the entire season. Obviously episode 4, Dear Billy, carried by Sadie Sink's performance, beautiful. I think episode 7 was just great in the revelations, and I can't wait for 8 and 9.